My name is Fatima Wahid, and I'm the co-chair of the recruitment committee for the IOT Summit. And it's incredible, it's unbelievable right now that we've been working on this since September, and the day has finally come. So all of you, 150 different girls coming from 30 different schools, will experience this summit 150 different ways. But what all of you will equally take from this is the ability to become change makers and influence tomorrow today. And now I'd like to give it over to Claire, who will be talking about social media. So enjoy, guys.
Raise your hand if you use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat. That's amazing, because we all know that social media has become a force for societal change, shining light on subjects previously unknown, deepening conversations, and empowering citizens of the world to unite and affect change. We are all so fortunate to be physically gathered in the same place to share our ideas. But let's also share ideas with the outside world by using the hashtag IOT Summit 2016. We are so honored and excited to have Susanna Gowanlock here as our Master of Ceremonies. Susanna is a Senior Associate at Catalyst, which is the leading global nonprofit organization expanding opportunity for women in business. Susanna works with companies by supporting their diversity and inclusion efforts and by acting as their main contact for research. Most importantly, Susanna is a proud BSS old girl and desperately misses shop cookies. We are delighted to have Susanna here to host the first ever IoT Summit. Prepare yourselves to be challenged, excited, and inspired. Everyone, I give you Susanna Gowanlock.
So Claire and Fatima, thank you so much for getting that started. I did just want to give one more round of applause to our entire IoT Summit Girls team. Girls, congratulations, your dream is a reality. So really stand up here, take this all in. This is amazing, and I'm so excited to get started. Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Susanna Gowanlock, and like was mentioned, I work at an organization called Catalyst. And what we do is we work with companies and we coach them on inclusion. So these are companies like RBC, like McDonald's, like Coca-Cola. And so obviously for me to be here today and to be here with all of you, 150 students from 30 different schools, is particularly important and important to me individually. I'm a passionate advocate for gender equality and have been since I went to BSS. And it's a pretty fun job I have to be able to do this every day. And the reason why I think inclusion is so important is not because it's the right thing to do, to harness diverse perspectives, to strive towards inclusion, but we know, and I know this at Catalyst, I know all of you as well, is that when we embrace and advocate for diversity, it's better off for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, and ultimately for our country. So really pat yourselves on the back for being here, for taking the Saturday off and coming in and being a part of this. We really appreciate it, and we're so excited to get started. I did just want to outline some of our goals and our agenda for today. Today you're going to hear a ton of different voices, and I hope a lot of them will be each other's. We have such a jam-packed agenda. The speakers are incredible. And so it's my job as your guide to help you understand these different perspectives. What's the value of having these different perspectives? How does this contribute to building communities? How does this contribute to what a leader looks like, what you think a might leader looks like, and what one can actually be? So what we all want to recognize, and like Fatima mentioned, is that you all come here with 150 different unique perspectives. So I'd like you today to reflect on your perspectives. Think about why you might have these. Are they based on assumptions? Do they come from somewhere else? And make sure you're taking time as speakers speak, whether it's to write down notes, to think in your head, to share on social media. And what I hope is when you're thinking and you're reflecting with all these different perspectives, let's recognize them, let's address them, and let's turn these voices into action and to take action. We've got a lot of different opportunities here to share and to reflect. I'll point you out at different points, and some of our speakers will as well, is if there's anything that you want to share. Maybe you've had a discussion at your table, maybe you have a thought, maybe you have quotes that you heard from a speaker that you liked, a question you have for people. We'd love for you to share it on our sharing wall. And if you're not comfortable right away to begin sharing, we have amazing facilitators who are going to help us throughout the day. Our facilitators are over in this corner. We can wave. Woohoo! And so they're going to be helping us throughout the day. So I encourage you all to speak with them, to speak with each other, and to use our sharing wall. We also have a photo booth that's outside. You might have seen it when you walked in. It's the amazing skyline of Toronto. Please use it during breaks. Use it as a way to share what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. And then I also want to make sure that all of you are making connections here together. My suggestion for all of you, or my dare for all of you, is to try to meet someone from all 30 schools. For those of you that are the one representative from your school, you might be hounded a bit, but I encourage you to really try to make connections beyond your school, beyond your table, so that we can get and really harness these diverse perspectives. So something at Catalyst that we say is that inclusion is about uniqueness and belonging. All of you are unique, but all of you belong here. And so in this group, we want to be able to create a collective story throughout the day. So before we jump into our first part of the presentation and get to our formal agenda, I did just want to establish 2 more housekeeping items. The first is that washrooms can be accessed both in this corner and going outside, and also over here and heading down the way. So good information to note. And also that the prayer room will be open between 1:15 and 1:30, and Fatima, who's right here, who introduced us this morning, will be able to take you there at that time. So before we get going, I did wonder if we could try to take a selfie. I'm actually going to do a panorama because I don't have excessively long arms and I don't own a selfie stick. So I'm going to do one this way, and then I'm going to try to get into it. So can everyone wave? Woohoo! I'm being told to slow down. That is amazing. This looks great, guys. Okay, 1 second. Oh, I don't have the passcode for this one. Okay, we'll have to do a selfie at another time. I'll make sure that we make time. I did just want to introduce our first video. And with that, I'm sure all of you have heard of CLARA HUGHES. You might know her as an athlete who's won Olympic medals both for Summer and Winter Olympics. You might not know that she's an athlete who has taken her platform as a successful sports athlete and really used it to discuss something that's important to her, and that's mental health. And I don't want to share too much, so I'll just jump in and we can watch our first video. And let's see if technology is my friend this morning.
Hello to all of you. I'm a 6-time Olympic medalist, speed skating and cycling, winter, summer, 6 different Olympic games, over half my life spent pursuing all things sport. But there was so much more to that pursuit and that path that I was on that has really fulfilled me as a human being. And those are the things that I want to talk about more than anything. As much as I am an Olympian and have all of those statistics, I'm also a part of another statistic, and that is the 1 in 5. The 1 in 5 Canadians that will go through a form of mental illness in their lifetime. As a young athlete, I went through major depression. It's something that I got through because I was able to receive help and was able to understand that I couldn't do it alone. And because of that experience, I understand what struggle is. I also understand because of my family's experience with mental illness. My sister struggles, my father struggled, my mother struggled. And this is something that affects every single one of us. So as much as I'm proud of those Olympic medals, I'm also proud of the struggles I've gone through because those struggles have allowed me to connect to so many people. And I guess I can say in retrospect and in the here and the now that we connect at the deepest level through struggle. And I hope that you can all understand that whatever difficulties you might go through in your life, in your pursuits, in your passions, when it seems impossible, and when you might get sick and realize that you have a sickness that you need help for, or it just may be struggle and you may feel like giving up, please understand that being a change maker means that you act, you care, you make a difference, you impact change in your community, in your country, in the world in any way that you can. And you have to find something that you're passionate about, that you connect to on a human level and on a deep level, that you understand and that you care about more than anything. I think that's what it means to be a change maker. And of course, like I said, never ever giving up. I learned so many things along the way, but I think what deeply inspired me the most was seeing how much people give, how much Canadians give in terms of volunteerism, in terms of community involvement, in terms of trying to make a difference. So I want to encourage each and every one of you to find that thing that matters so deeply, and then give yourself to it. Make it a part of your modus operatus, your way of living and being, and influencing. Every single one of you can and will find something to connect to and make a difference with. There were so many times when it seemed impossible for me, and how did I not give up? I didn't give up because giving up would mean creating that option for myself. It would mean that the next time it got hard or difficult or just seemed so utterly impossible, I would have that option of quitting. And so I never really gave myself that option, and understood deeply that as hard as it seemed, giving up would be harder, because then the next time it would be even harder to continue and to push through. So that's definitely what helped me, was that mindset of never creating negative options for myself. Always realizing that as difficult as things seem, the lessons are in almost the losing. As an athlete, I lost so many more races than I ever won. And I learned the most from the times where I didn't have the success I thought I wanted or needed. Those are the times of learning, of growing, of being inspired, and coming back even stronger. So please realize that the success that you have is merely a platform. The success you might achieve is a platform, is a voice that you will have, and you can use that voice to reach out and help others. And if you don't take that voice, if you don't take that platform and opportunity and make it more by reaching out and giving back, I don't know how much it's going to mean to you. I have 6 Olympic medals that sit on my bookshelf that I look at from time to time, and most often I share with others. Because for me, those medals are just representations of a moment in time when I was able to succeed at the highest level in sport. But what I think about when I see them is everything I did with that success, reaching out to Right to Play, reaching out in terms of making a difference for those who suffer in silence because of living with forms of mental illness, and the struggle and the stigma that's attached to it, the advocacy that I've been able to do to try to end that silence for people who are struggling. So when I see the successes I've had, I only see what I've done with them. And when I see what I've done, I realize there's so much more to do. So all of you influencers of tomorrow, go and do and act and make a difference. You, as girls, can change this world. It is, in fact, up to you to change this world and make it better for all of us, me included. Good luck.
I am so thrilled to be here today on behalf of RBC. Women have done so much, girls have done so much to boost their confidence, to boost their capability. I'm here today to talk about diversity and inclusion and unconscious bias. And you may be asking, why unconscious bias? Why now? Why is this important for us to be talking about? McKinsey & Company, for those of you who are familiar with McKinsey, really incredible consulting company that we work with, not just in North America, but abroad. They went through a research study which showed that companies that were more racially and ethnically diverse than their non-diverse competitors were 35% more likely to financially outperform their non-diverse competitors. 35% more likely to financially outperform a non-diverse competitor. Pretty awesome, right? So here's a next awesome stat. Companies that are more gender diverse are 15% more likely to financially outperform their non-diverse competitors. So what we hear from that is diversity and inclusion matters. It matters to success, not to just individual success, but collective success. And so, certainly that's a very powerful concept and something that we need to continue to be mindful of. But something that you need to be mindful of is you start to think about which companies you want to align yourselves with as you go out into the workplace. Do you want to work with companies that have values that sound like yours, that have boards of directors that look like you? And I would say, certainly from my perspective, the resounding answer is always yes. I want to be surrounded by individuals who come to the table with diverse perspectives, because they're going to make my thinking better. If I just am surrounded by my own thinking all day, I'm going to get this far. But if I bring your thinking to the table, I'm going to get this far. So when we talk about diversity, now we're going to go the dictionary version, okay? So it's any dimension that can be used to differentiate groups and people from one another. So your ethnicity, your gender, your age, sexual orientation, disabilities, abilities, education, religion, etc. And so it's factors that people see or they think they see when they look at you that help define their view of diversity. Now, what you answered, and I think is so powerful, is that instead of seeing diversity as factors, you saw it as inclusion. You saw it as a state of being valued and involved and respected for your ideas, and the diversity that you bring to the table is not about what you look like or where you come from, but about how you think and what you do with what you think. So it's really ensuring that inclusion, as I always think of it as being so closely tied to the word included. You need to feel included to feel like you have a voice. And so diversity is a wonderful thing, but if we don't have inclusion, then that, of course, doesn't allow us to rely on the success that companies and individuals can have when they're surrounded by people who are bringing those diverse topics to the table. So diversity and inclusion, of course, is, so diversity is the mix. So, I look like this or sound like this and come from here and you are different. And together, inclusion is that mix working well together. Now, the challenge is it doesn't always work together as well as we'd like. And that's where something called unconscious bias plays in. So unconscious bias is essentially a mental shortcut that our brains take when making decisions. And so the human brain certainly is very hardwired to make fast-paced decisions. You guys make these fast-paced decisions every day. And a very small percentage of that decision-making process is based on your conscious mind, what you know, what you see. Much of that decision-making process is related to things that you're not readily seeing, but are based on your experiences and assumptions that you come to the table with. You know the word stereotype? It's kind of an ugly word, right? Now, stereotyping is a very dangerous part of unconscious bias and something that still, no matter what we do, tends to filter into our decision-making process because it's based on experience and because your brain doesn't readily acknowledge that it's drawing on that in making that decision. As we really take a look at what that means to us going forward, it's really about ensuring that when we are making these decisions, that we can unearth the fact that we're making it maybe based on poor judgment sometimes, right? I'll give you an example. We recently went through a hiring panel, and it was for a senior executive team. And when individuals were reviewing applications, the view was that some of the male candidates were coming to the surface as being potentially seen as more competent and more able to hit the ground running. And the female candidates were equally as credited and skilled and ready to go. So why is that? Because historically, we have put emphasis on men's competence and confidence in delivering in the workplace, and maybe more emphasis with women on their nurturing capability and their likability. If any of you have been watching the presidential race in the US, when you read about Hillary Clinton, the question always arises, is she likable enough? Do we like her hair? Is she still wearing a headband? How about her shoes? Do we like her outfit? As opposed to, What are her ideas? Is she going to create change? Is she going to be a representative for us? Do you hear them talking about male candidates' shoes or what their tie look like or whether, well, their hair? There's a whole other Donald Trump discussion around hair, but generally speaking, we don't hear these attributes being pointed towards men. We hear these conversations being pointed towards women. I recently was at an International Women's Day event, and we talked a lot about this idea of kind of being exactly who you are when you come into the workplace, and it shouldn't matter if you're a man or a female. You should come into the workplace and be your best self. And what ended up happening was women started unconsciously tearing each other down. Our challenge, of course, is taking this unconscious bias and really helping identify that it is something that's factoring into your decision making. Taking a step back and asking yourself whether or not the decisions you're making are based on objective criteria or they're based on maybe that experience that you had that was poor or positive and how that's influenced your decision-making criteria. There is a test called an implicit association test. It is done by Harvard, and essentially it's a test that allows you to go through and identify whether or not you're making good decisions quickly based on good information. So I'll ask you to mark this down, implicit.harvard.edu. I want you to go in and take one of these IAT tests after the end of the day. Implicit.harvard.edu. So this is your brain. This is your conscious brain. It's also an iceberg, that's our metaphor, but your conscious brain is everything that is above the surface. And your unconscious brain takes the majority of your brain power, and it's everything that's below the surface. And so understanding what an important role your unconscious mind is playing in your decision making is going to allow you to continue to address these obstacles as they come up. So I'm going to give you one example here. Have any of you ever seen examples that look like this? They look virtually the same. Male and female, same posture, same smile, friendly but assertive. The male is called boss. The woman is called bossy, which is not necessarily a very positive way of looking at how a woman in a leadership position can really make a difference. And I would encourage you, as you're thinking about these very small examples, to think about, am I making assumptions based on what I think is happening in the background or what is really happening? Am I using objective decision making as I work through what's important to me? So what can you do differently? Of course, we can't change what we're not aware of, so it's just important to continue to be aware that you're having these unconscious biases, but once you're aware of them, you all of a sudden see that change. So I'll ask you just to find ways not just to ensure that you're making good decisions based on understanding what's underneath the surface in my decision making and what's the small portion that's based on good judgment, but also to encourage others to do the same. So as a takeaway today, I want you to think about 2 things that you think that you can do differently as it relates to unconscious bias. Take the IAT test, the test that I gave you from Harvard. Encourage others to do the same. It's really about finding ways to do whatever we can to push each other forward instead of hold each other back based on small factors that sometimes can get in the way. And I'll encourage you, as you're just going back to school, going back to work, learn more about each other. Don't make assumptions based on what someone looks like or where they come from to form your decisions. Find out what informs their decisions based on what's important to them. Where they come from allows them to provide you with so much more creative and intellectual diversity to help you make better decisions and be more successful long term. And ultimately, just continue to keep these points of view as an open discussion. If we can get beyond unconscious bias, we can do amazing things as women. And I am so thrilled to see all of you come together on a Saturday to talk about how we're going to move not just the girls movement or the women movement, but the people movement forward by ensuring that we're doing the right thing every day when we're making our decisions, and we're going to push our success to brand new levels. So thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And please hire me when you become my boss later on, because I know we have so much immense talent around the table, and we're so proud at RBC to be a part of it. So thank you so much.
Our first keynote speaker calls herself an accidental activist. She's an international activist challenging societal and cultural norms to champion women's participation in peace and conflict mediation. She's an advisor of numerous international security boards, think tanks, and organizations like the United Nations Women Global Advisory Board. The New York Times has named her the International Trust Women Hero of 2014. No big deal. And BBC calls her one of today's top 100 women. Newsweek calls her one of 5 to watch. And did I mention that she's also a doctor? So, ladies, I would love to introduce you to Dr. ALAA MURABIT.
How are you all? Doing good? So, first off, I'm honored to be here, and I'm not just saying that. I am supposed to be right now flying from Oxford, London, to Istanbul, Turkey. And then I received the email to come here and to speak with all of you. And I was pretty taken aback because I have a 12-year-old sister and a 14-year-old sister. And my 14-year-old sister is in grade 10 in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan. And they very rarely are presented with these kind of opportunities. So I told my team I'd really like to be in Toronto. And my team yelled at me, as they always do. And then they made it happen, so I'm here today. But I have to say 2 things, and I want you guys to hear me out. I'm not really that impressed. And the reason I say that is because I have just an underlying expectation that young women will do absolutely wonderful things. I kind of expect for you guys to organize and to amplify your voices. That's an expectation I think you all have of each other, or else you wouldn't be here, right? Thank you very much for the introduction. I am one of 17 Sustainable Development Goal advocates. So I get to work with the Prime Minister of Norway, I get to work with Nobel laureates, Messi and Shakira, who seem to be the ones that always get the loudest round of applause, on ensuring that our global goals reach universally. I'm also a UN High Commissioner for Public Health and Economic Empowerment and Employment. What that means is I get to go around the world to communities like this, and I get to say, okay, so what is missing from your community? What do you wish you had? What do you wish you knew? What do you wish you were able to do? And how can we, as an entity, make sure that's possible? Yes, I finished elementary school at 11, and I finished, 12, and I finished high school at 15, and I finished medical school by the time I was 22. And the reason is because I thought I knew everything. I swear, it genuinely was. People laugh, and the reason you laugh is because a lot of people have told you your whole life not to act like you know everything. A lot of people have told you that. And when you raise your hand in class, or when you give an opinion, people tell you not to be so pushy about it. And they tell you not to force your opinions down people's throats. And they tell you, you're not always right. People are always going to say it to you. It's not going to go away by nature of the fact that you're young women. You're going to become older women, and people will still be telling you you are wrong. 50% of the time, 90% of the time, when it's your job to know, they'll still tell you you don't know as much as the next person. And usually the next person is a guy. And the guy gets validation from the day he's born. He is told he is going to be a president. He's told he's going to be an international soccer star. He's told he's going to be a superhero. He goes to the mall and he sees toys which are completely packaged and conditioned to make him feel as though he is on top of the world. So men get validation that women don't. They don't. Women are told that they have to be the perfect students. They have to have the perfect bodies. Eventually, you're going to have to become the perfect mothers. If you're going to be a working mother, God forbid. If you're going to be a stay-at-home mom, that's worse. In university, you're going to have to be able to be a good university student, but still be able to hang out and party with the other guys, but still get the best marks and still get a good job afterwards, where you're going to get paid much less than your male counterparts. Those are facts. That's the way the world works. So me being a young 13, 14, 15-year-old girl who thought I knew everything was abnormal. And it made it very difficult for me when I was younger. And then I grew up. And I realized in a world where a lot of girls are told they know nothing, it's actually quite refreshing to think you know something. And it gets you much farther than you would expect. So the reason I became an accidental activist, the reason I even thought I could do it, was because I thought I knew what the problem was and how I could solve it. And turns out I've been right quite a bit. Like I'm not saying, but I have. So, and the reason I say that is because a lot of you probably have ideas of things you want to do, and they might be small. You might be thinking of getting a part-time job and wondering, can you handle that in school? I don't know what it is, but some of you guys have stuff going on. And those are big things for you right now, and they count, and they matter, and the one thing you need to do is respect that you actually know something. That's it. Respect that you, in and of yourself, have enough knowledge to get from point A to point B, whatever point B is. Whether it's small or big, because in 20, 30 years, you might be sitting there thinking, do I want to run for president? And you have to respect that you know something. You have to validate yourself, because usually no one else will validate you. Why there are so few women? Which part of the problem do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the structural, the institutional, or the individual? So structurally, okay, so we'll take away the structural and the institutional. I think everybody recognizes that there are severe disadvantages for women in professional positions. And that comes from the fact that women are required to do more at home. They put in a lot more work out of their actual job and into their community, and they also put a lot of their economic resources into their community rather than into their own career progression, right? And that's an individual decision every single person makes. Unfortunately, society makes a lot of it for women because society teaches men that they do not have the same responsibilities as women at home. And that's something we definitely need to change. Second to that is oftentimes you find that the benefits for women, and Canada is one of the few countries that does not have this as badly, but still has it. The benefits for women to work actually sometimes outweigh in their own personal viewpoint and with their own personal commitments, the benefits of working. And the reason I say that is, for example, let's say you have 2 kids, you have to pay for childcare, and childcare is extremely expensive, and your job only gives you $30,000 a year. If you're paying most of it into childcare and transportation for those kids, and it almost becomes futile to work, especially if you don't get to progress as quickly. So those are structural problems, and those are things that we have to deal with through legislation and through implementation and et cetera. The individual problems I actually think are worse. And I know that's going to be a bit of a touchy comment, but they are. Women, on average, ask for a raise or a promotion 1 out of 10 times, compared to men who ask 9 out of 10 times. So women wait until they're told, you know what, you're good enough, you can get promoted. And men go in, they say, listen, by the way, I'd like a 20% raise. I did a good job here, right? Women out of university tend not to apply to jobs where 80% of men do, even though they are less qualified. Women tend to go into particular fields in university, so they'll go into the hospitality fields. And that, again, is because of the time restraint of going into something that's in technology or innovation or engineering or medicine. But unfortunately, those are the jobs that make a lot more, right? So it's about those things. And then when you get to that stage, when you're getting to why don't they get to the high-level political and business positions, you have the underlying barriers, which restricted them from getting equal treatment as they were moving up the career ladder, right? So you might have 50-50 entry. In a lot of careers in Canada and in the US, you have 50-50 entry. By the time they get to their mid-30s, it's now been 30% women stay in that position and 70% men. And as you get slowly to the top, it ends up being, for the vast majority, about 90% men, 10% women, right? In certain careers, it's actually less. It's 98% men, 2% women, right? And the reason that happens is because, first off, a lot of women take themselves out of the running. They don't put their names forward. They don't put themselves forward. But then, as a collective whole, there is not enough support for women in positions of power. If you were tomorrow to run for school president, you actually find that women vote for other women less than men do. And that is because we often see their ability in likeness of our own. So as a young woman, I might think, what can Emma do? I mean, she's just a young woman. She's like me. And it comes a lot about confidence and that validation that we were talking about. So there's a lot of definite structural problems. And if we were to rectify those, we could push women forward into the career in the first place. But in order for them to progress and elevate to the necessary positions, then it becomes a lot more individual and collective. So women as a whole need to support other women, but additionally, women individually need to recognize their own strength. So for me, I had personal challenges of what society expected a young Muslim Arab woman to say, do, and look like. So when I was exceptionally opinionated, people said, well, wait a second, aren't you supposed to be oppressed? Or aren't you guys not supposed to be this vocal in your community? And I said, my community is Saskatoon. Nobody told me to be quiet there. So our experiences are going to be different based on the way you were brought up, based on what your background is, and your challenges will be different. The similarity, I think, is in the way that I react to my challenges and in the way you react to yours, that we can respect one another. The one thing I will say is that age is something you grow out of. And for all of you right now, age, a lot of people will tell you, is a weakness, especially if you're going into high-level corporate or political work. They'll say age is a weakness. And age is something you grow out of. And what I did, I think, was wrong. When I was 21, people were telling me, by the way, age is a weakness. And I was like, I only have 10 years until I'm 30 years old, and then I'll figure it all out. And I regret that. So I think for everyone in this room, recognize that you might have 5, 10 years, take full advantage of them. I don't think women wear the word ambition well because of society's perceptions of what that word means. Do I think women are innately less ambitious? No. No. As a medical doctor, definitely not. There is nothing innately different about men and women, but society teaches us from a very young age we should be polite, quiet, and never strive to go very far. And I think that that's something that we have to change on our own in our individual space, and you'll notice that you empower other girls by changing that. That's it, I think. Okay, thank you all very, very, very much.
Thank you.
I did not...
Leading our next breakout activity is none other than the Director of the Human Rights Watch Canada, JASMINE HERLT. JASMINE HERLT is contributing greatly to our society with her research, women's rights initiatives, and advocacy through influential and well-known organizations.
She's an admirable and inspiring female leader who is here to speak to us today about changing the game for girls. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming none other than a true voice of women everywhere, JASMINE HERLT.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having me here today at the Influencers of Toronto Summit. This is just a fantastic event. So the theme today is how can we make Toronto more inclusive? For me, inclusion means respecting one another and celebrating diversity. Inclusion means respecting human rights and fighting for justice. At Human Rights Watch, we fight for the inclusion of women in many countries around the world. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a milestone document in the history of human rights. Article 1 states, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. All are entitled, without any discrimination, to equal protection of the law. When we talk about making Toronto more inclusive, I urge you to think about that in light of the Universal Declaration of Rights. Today, I would like to discuss how Human Rights Watch is fighting to make Iran more inclusive and how you here in Toronto can help. We are fighting for the rights of women to participate in sports in Iran. In particular, we are advocating for the rights of women and girls to watch volleyball games at public stadiums. Before I get into the details, I think it's important to tell you a little bit about who we are as an organization and what we do. Human Rights Watch is the leading independent organization dedicated to defending and protecting human rights around the world. We work in over 90 countries and we have 400 staff, and we have an office here in Toronto at Yonge and Eglinton. We send our researchers to some of the most dangerous parts of the world to investigate abuses against the powerless and the marginalized. We talk to survivors of torture, to people who have been detained for exercising fundamental rights that many of us take for granted. We photograph and film evidence. We visit morgues and hospitals, police stations and prisons. We examine medical reports, satellite images. We create a cast iron record of what happened, who did it, and to whom. We then show the world's decision makers what they can do to end abuses. And we make it clear that we will continue to put pressure on them until change happens. Our multimedia work, writing reports, taking videos, tweeting, posting on Facebook, and feeding YouTube, helps ensure that our research missions are not ignored. Women's rights are severely restricted in Iran, to the point where women are forbidden from watching men's sports in stadiums. That ban includes Iran's national obsession, which is volleyball. The ban on women in sports is emblematic of the repression of women across that country. Women confront serious discrimination on issues such as marriage, divorce, and child custody. Women have been sent to jail for just speaking out in favor of equal rights for women. Married women can't even leave the country without their husband's permission. Now, I'm sure many of you in the audience are thinking, why volleyball? Aren't there more important issues for Human Rights Watch to be addressing around the world? Well, we believe that success on this level is just the beginning of something much larger. The right of women to attend male volleyball matches symbolizes the basic rights of women in public life and will transform the lives of millions. Despite the small victory, Human Rights Watch has been continuing to pressure the government to eliminate barriers that prevent millions of women and girls from participating in sports across the country. We have a planning meeting every year in New York, and that's where our head office is, and actually in the Empire State Building, and everybody comes together from all over the world. And so we have, the Children's Rights Division gets together, Women's Rights, the LGBT Division, et cetera, and then people go through a sort of a planning session and say, looking at all the issues, where will we have impact? Where can our voices be heard? Because there's so many other groups as well working on issues. So for example, we don't really work on sex trafficking because there's so many other groups that are doing fantastic work on that. So we feel we don't need to get into that space. Let's take on issues that are maybe that people aren't taking on. So we often essentially try and shine a light on some of the darkest places in the world where people don't go, like the Central African Republic, and document the conflicts that are going on there. So we try and choose topics and issues where we can make a difference and where others aren't really involved in. It seems that we just keep growing in terms of the divisions, the number of countries that we're covering. So obviously the vision would be to try and solve a lot of these world issues. We won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1997 for our work on landmines. We were really instrumental with a bunch of other groups, including Amnesty, for banning landmines. So that was a big champagne moment for us. But it doesn't happen very often. Sometimes our work takes years and years and years. You saw in the video about bringing a dictator to justice, Hassan Habre. We've been working on that case for 20 years, gathering evidence, talking to victims, testifying in court. So sometimes it can be a very long road to justice.